It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Adi Godrej, the chairman of the Godrej Group. Mr. Godrej needs no introduction. He has been the president of several Indian trade and industrial bodies, as well as associations. He is the chairman of the board of the Indian School of Business and past president of the Confederation of Indian Industry. He has been a member of the Dean's Advisory Council of the MIT Sloan School of Management, chairman of the Board of Governors of the Narsi Monji Institute of Management Studies, and a member of the Wharton Asian Executive Board. Mr. Godrej is also a patron of the Himalayan Club. He is a recipient of several awards and recognitions, such as the Rajiv Gandhi Award, the American Indian Foundation Leadership in Philanthropy Award, the Entrepreneur of the Year for the Asia Pacific Entrepreneurship Awards, Best Businessman of the Year for the GQ Men of the Year Award. He is also a recipient of the Padma Bhushan and has won the Clinton Global Citizen Award for his leadership in the private sector. Mr. Godrej, the list is endless. Your contribution to the Indian industry is invaluable. We are so fortunate to have you with us at the 21st Wharton India Economic Forum. Sir, we would now request you to please say a few words and inaugurate our conference.
Harbir, Professor Chaudhary, Prerak, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the very kind introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here at this Wharton India Economic Forum being held in Mumbai. I have been to one in Philadelphia once and addressed it there. I think it's a very good time you have chosen to hold this forum in India. India's prominence in the economy of the world is gaining ground quite considerably, and this is a very good time to hold such discussions in India. As Harbir mentioned, I've had many connections with Wharton over the years, very fond connections. As he mentioned, two of my children went to Wharton as undergraduates. Nisa, I think she graduated in 2000, and my son Pirosha graduated in 2002. I also have a son-in-law, Nisa's husband, who is a Wharton MBA. His name is Kalpesh Mehta. And of course, my first connection with Wharton started when I was on the founding group for the Indian School of Business. And as you know, from the very beginning, Wharton has been an affiliate of the Indian School of Business. Indian School of Business has gained tremendously from its affiliation with Wharton in many different ways. And several professors, including, of course, Harbir and others. Do you also, have you taught at the ISB also, of course? And have taught at the ISB, and now the ISB has two campuses, the original one in Hyderabad and one in Mohali near Chandigarh. And fortunately, the school is doing very well. It has grown considerably, and thanks to connections with Wharton and other such great global universities, it has done quite well. I also served for a few years on the Wharton Asian Advisory Board, which was a great pleasure. I used to visit Philadelphia for those meetings sometimes. And of course, I didn't know it at that time, but when I first met your ex-dean, Tom Geraghty, I found out that he and I were classmates at MIT. But we didn't know each other at MIT. Now, as I mentioned, this is a great time to hold this forum in India. India, in economic terms, is gaining what I would call global space and recognition. For the last couple of years, India has been the fastest growing major economy in the world. We also have a reform-oriented free enterprise-oriented government for the last 2.5 years, which has a majority in the lower house of parliament, and several steps towards reform and growth have been initiated. Some of them are ones that will take a little time to fructify. Others have already started showing results. Many good programs, many shifts in the economic emphasis in India. For example, the Make in India program, where manufacturing is being sought to be paid a lot of attention. Unfortunately, the salience of manufacturing in Indian GDP has been very low, and the Make in India program seeks to increase this salience of manufacturing from the current 16% or so to about 25%. A lot of reform measures are also on the way. Of course, you must have seen the very recent demonetization scheme, which of course has had considerable number of critics, particularly those whose unaccounted money was demonetized. But it's also a reform that will take a little time to take effect. But one of the things is it will certainly, to my mind, have a strong effect against accumulation of unaccounted black money, but it has also had its effect on counterfeit currency that was coming from a neighboring country and was financing terrorism to a certain extent. The problems in Kashmir, terrorist-related problems, have declined considerably after November 8th. Also, what has not been publicized a lot is Naxalite problems have reduced quite a lot, because without unaccounted money, Naxalite financing has also become difficult. And so fortunately, things in the Naxal areas have improved. And the amount of money going into India's banking system will increase very considerably with demonetization, which will lead to a considerable increase in formal banking availability to small sectors of the economy, small and medium sectors of the economy, rather than them having to depend on money lenders and other high-cost lenders, which of course affects their growth potential. So there are potentially very strong positive impacts on our long-term GDP growth through this measure. Of course, for the short term, there were some issues to be dealt with, but that also, to my mind, are getting over quite easily, and I think cash availability in India by the end of January should be adequate. And we have seen in our businesses, sales were affected in November, but picked up quite well during December. The biggest reform that is coming to India is the goods and services tax. It's a very strong indirect tax reform. Once implemented, it is likely to add 1.5 to 2 percentage points to India's GDP growth, because a lot of efficiency is derived. Evading indirect taxes will become very difficult once GST is in place. Although it's got a little delayed, I think it should be implemented by around the 1st of July this year. And once it is implemented, it will add tremendous momentum to India's economy. In fact, it is quite possible with the GST being implemented that India could go into some years of double-digit GDP growth. 3 to 5 years from now, India, as many of you know, will become the most populous country in the world. We will overtake China in population. Now, one might say that we are such a densely populated country, we have a lot of problems of a large population, but what it brings with it is excellent demography. We will be one of the few large economies in the world to have a good demography, where the percentage of working age population to the total population will keep increasing, and the dependency of the nation's economy to take care of the old age people will not be there like in many other economies. So it will help us grow much faster than other economies. And it is projected that by 2050, 2050, India would become the largest economy in the world by purchasing power parity, if you measure it by purchasing power parity, because that's a good measure, because it takes care of prices being very different in different economies. So it is projected. Citigroup had done a paper on this a couple of years ago, and now a lot of evidence is coming up that this is quite likely. It is already in purchasing power parity terms. China is the world's largest economy, the US is number 2, and India is number 3. And we just overtook Japan last year. It is expected that between 2030 and 2040, India will overtake the US in GDP by purchasing power parity, and by 2040 and 2050, we are likely to overtake China. Again, it of course depends on how strong we take economic measures that are reform-oriented, that are growth-oriented, that are progress-oriented. It also, of course, depends on whether we go on to our familiar habit of stepping on our own toes, which, of course, we should avoid. But I think more and more it seems that we will do well and that the country will grow very strongly. Wharton is a great pioneering management school. It is very important that management in all its aspects are implemented, not just for business. In fact, management schools have tended to be called business schools, but I like to think of them as propagating management in all walks of life. And one of the most important areas where I think we need good management, not just in India but all over the world, is government. There are many other areas where good management can add a lot of value, and it is schools like Wharton which help propagate this. And to my mind, it's not just management that is important. Management is very important, but leadership is what is extremely important. If you look at whether it is governments, whether it is other organizations like educational organizations, health organizations, business organizations, where leadership is strong, the organizations do very well. So leadership is very important, and it is schools like Wharton, and I do hope schools like the Indian School of Business impart strong leadership learning over the years. Thank you very much. Great pleasure to be here and meet all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Godrej, for your inspiring words. I request Mr. Chaudhary to make the thank you note.
Thank you very much, Mr. Godrej, for not only your inspiring but also your thoughtful remarks to help us get this proceeding started. Clearly, you've set the tone for this event, but more than that, I think you've also challenged us to think about how each of us in our professional and personal capacities may also make a contribution to the India story. What I gathered from your remarks is that obviously India is a very exciting place to be and at an exciting time in history, but at the same time stands at a very important crossroad where the decisions that are taken today and the initiatives and actions that are taken today will have tremendous consequence for how well India is able to realize this ever-present potential that we talk about. This is a perfect way to start the event and inaugurate the proceedings. Thank you very much for all your support over the years, and we hope we can count on you in the future as well.
Professor Chaudhary, we would please like you to present a memento to Mr. Godrej.